I just want you to know, for whoever has not spoken out, that that was a crime. For a long time, I was consumed in shame, guilt, embarrassment, and I didn't know it was a crime. And it led me to a road of destruction, bad relationships, bad places. Excuse me. And I didn't know that there was help out there. It wasn't until, it led me on a path of destruction, even in my decision making. And I chose the wrong men, the wrong friends. And it was a very dark place. It wasn't until I went to prison that I found out that help was available and that this was a crime and I could move on with my life. But I was so angry, confused, I had no self-worth, and that really paralyzed me, And then I got into a relationship, wrong decision making again, because I didn't get no help for all of that stuff. And it led me to choose the wrong man, which led me up here to a domestic violence situation where my life was almost taken. And I was spared. And while I was laying there in that fire, don't know how I survived, but I know it was my God. And this was a journey for me. And I came up here, and I was very broken. And I walked into mental health, and I got the help that I needed. From that day on, I've been on a healthy path. I want to say that. The first 3 words a victim wants to hear in order for them to survive is, I believe you. I believe you. I believe you. And then you become a survivor. There are pamphlets, there are helplines, there are safety groups that you can go to and start healing. So please, whatever dark road you're on, break the silence. Take your power back and let the healing begin. Thank you.
And still I rise, said Maya Angelou. These words ring true for me because still I rise. And many who have heard bits and pieces of my story will ask, how? How do you do this? Well, we rise by lifting others. I spent 8 years in a relationship with a bipolar, narcissist, alcoholic, drug addict. 8 years of never knowing who was going to walk through the front door, when the manic moments were going to come that would save me, or when it was all going to go downhill on the roller coaster. So we rise by lifting others. And when I left in November of 2012, I started to rise for my children. I have 3 beautiful children. They're my rock. They're what gave me the courage to break out after 8 years of this roller coaster. They were the ones in the room next to me, hearing me be raped, being beaten. They went through all these years of abuse as well. 8 years of hiding bruises, both emotionally and physically. All this time of thinking I should leave, but then not. And that brings us to the biggest question: why do we stay? You can look at somebody and say, why didn't you leave? And you're so caught up in the moment of trying to just get through it and survive this storm, and it's going to be okay. And that next manic moment comes with him, and it's all going to be all right now. It's going to be great. So I rose by starting to lift with them. And that's why I'm here today. If we rise by lifting others, maybe we can start to stop this. if I can start here, or anywhere else that I speak, or I tell my story to, or I see somebody. I've come a long way since I left in 2012. I work as an EMT now, and I'm in school to become a paramedic, almost there. Come August, I'll be done. Ironically, last week we covered abuse, including domestic abuse. And in paramedicine, there's a lot of gray area. It's never this black and white thing, but I was so disturbed when I read our chapter on abuse because it was so cookie cutter. These are the signs, and these are, what you look for. And I'm like, that's not what you see. You don't see that. It's all hidden. We all hide behind everything. We cover it up. We cover it up with excuses, with makeup. You can't see that. I had a patient just last month that they asked her how many times, do you feel safe at home, the police said as we're on scene. We weren't dispatched for a domestic dispute. It was, she fell down. How many times have I said that excuse? And I spent some time with her in the back of the ambulance, still on scene, and I washed her face. She was covered in blood. And I saw these bruises, and I'm like, those aren't bruises from tripping and falling. And I said to her, just look at me. I said, I am a survivor of domestic abuse, and I want you to know that I'm here to help you. And she looked up and she said, is that why they keep asking me if I feel safe? And I said, yeah. And it all just came out of her as she looked down and didn't even know that she was bleeding, didn't even realize, all this blood that was all over her. And her eyes were just opened, and she said, I can't believe he did this to me. It's those moments. I was able to lift her up in that moment. Are we taking every time in our day when we are with our coworkers and maybe we don't know everything that's going on, or our friends or our family? Are we really looking for these things? And I hope that opens your eyes today to know that it's not this textbook symptoms and signs that we look for. We don't all fit the textbook. We're great at hiding it. We're great at putting on that big smile, going into work every day, going to school, living our lives. But you pick up on those little pieces. And I sat there and thought, as I took my quizzes, and I didn't like the questions that they asked, and I didn't like the answers that they gave, these cookie cutters again. And I said, how do you teach this? How do you teach courage? How do you teach courage to stand up and do something for yourself? How do you teach someone the courage to go out and help somebody else, or be that voice? And I hope you leave here today with a little more courage. And I hope I can lead by example when I tell my stories. I hope in that way we can lift others up and make a change. So be aware. Listen. Really listen. Listen without responding. Listen to what people are saying, because you will see through things if you just take that moment. And if it's you, take a step back and say, is this really right? Is this where I need to be? Don't make it that moment where you're fighting for your life. I waited till that moment where the breath left my body and everything started to go dark, and it took that last second of procrastination to say, I gotta fight. Don't make that your moment. Don't leave that as somebody else's moment. Rise. Rise with your voice. Rise by lifting others, because still I rise.
First, I would like to say, I'm Christy Lynch, and I'm a victim of domestic violence and a double homicide survivor. You guys can't see this picture, but this picture is a very happy time of my life. It's my mom, my dad, and I on my wedding day. The biggest smile I probably had in years. I want to start off with a quote. It's by Julie Johnston, and it says, "The time when domestic violence is the most lethal is when the person is trying to leave the abusive situation." This reminds me of my story. I met my abuser when I was 22 in 1998. I fell head over heels in love. I thought I met the man of my dreams. He made me happy. He told me things I wanted to hear. He said the sweetest things, and he always made me feel special. 4 short months into our relationship, I started seeing signs of abuse, but I ignored every single one of those signs. It started with harsh words, demeaning me, making me feel like I was worthless. As time went on, it led into physical and sexual abuse. After a short breakup, we ended up getting married in 2002. On the outside, we seemed like a very happy couple. When I finally got the nerve up to say something, nobody could believe it. Nobody didn't want to believe it. People would say, "He wasn't thinking. He got angry. It was the heat of a moment." Or, "You know what? I think you're really exaggerating." After we had our son in 2003, the abuse got worse. I finally got up the courage to leave, and in 2006, we moved in with my mom and dad. That is when my nightmare began. 911 was called, restraining orders were obtained, the threats continued, and things just got worse. The night of June 27th, he broke into my mom and dad's house where my son and I lived and shot and killed my mom and dad. My son and I were able to get out that night, and we made it to the police department. I say this all the time, my son was truly a gift of God. My parents were there watching over me. When I got out into the driveway, my dad's keys were still in the car. I got in that car, drove really, really fast with my son on my lap, and I just kept on telling him, "It's going to be okay. I'm going to take care of you." When we got to the police department, we pulled up in our pajamas, my son in a diaper, and I got out and I said, "You have to help me. My parents just were killed by my husband." We got in the police department that night, and it was a nightmare. My life shattered in just those moments. It felt like I was there forever, when all in reality, in a matter of half an hour, he broke into our house and killed them. From then on, I was there, left to pick up the pieces. My family was left there to pick up the pieces of what he created. He tore everything apart. He is now serving life in prison for what he did. My son is now 14. He's an amazing kid. And like I said, I thank God every day. I left because of him. I know that he deserved better, and I did not want to give him the life that we were going down. I am here to tell you that even through our worst nightmares, if we are there for one another, if we support one another instead of looking the other way, we can make a difference. I wish I had one of you back in 1998 to tell me that I was worth it, so I had the courage to leave. We all are survivors, and we have a job to do. And that is why I'm here today. I never want this happen to somebody else. If you ever hear a word, have something thrown past your head, a punch in the wall, just leave. Just leave. Tell somebody, talk to somebody. Somebody will believe you. Don't stay because you don't know what's going to happen. I stayed, and I never want that to happen to you. Thank you.
Tonight, I'm not going to speak about myself and tell my story. I'm going to speak for my sister-in-law, who on December 15th of 2015 was murdered by her husband, who abused her. And she didn't have the courage to reach out to anybody. Her husband David is my daughter's uncle biologically, and he was very controlling, and I could see it. And I tried to reach out to Chrissy many times. I gave her Becky's number to call, domestic violence to talk to, the REACH program to reach out to. Cops were called numerous times. There were numerous restraining orders that were lifted by the courtroom of the judges that placed these restraining orders. Chrissy was the type of person that was full of life. She had 4 children, 3 of which were triplets. Her oldest son just turned 17 on April 7th, and this was his father that took his mother's life. I don't know if many of you have read in the paper, but it was the David Agan case against Christina Agan at the VMA. He stabbed her in the throat with a screwdriver, and then multiple stabs to the face, to the point where she was unidentified. They could not identify her by her face. Chrissy and David would meet each other up at the Blue Spruce where David was living. She would help David out as much as possible. Chrissy couldn't make a move without David at all. Like, she couldn't go to the store without David being there, and if she talked to somebody, David was all over her. This was the type of man that made her cut his food. He would sit in front of a computer and play computer all day long, his little video games, The Sims, other games, Warcraft. He was abusive to their children. And all the signs are there, and I seen them, and I tried to help her. So many times. I reached out to her so many times. And it got to the point where, quite honestly, I had to remove myself from trying to help her because she wasn't willing at the time to leave. She loved him. She saw something in him that none of us saw, and none of us could really understand but her. David was evil. Not only did he murder his wife, but he sexually molested his daughter. Okay? And on top of that, there were other allegations that were made that came out in the end that were true. Not every woman has the strength, even with help, to get away because they don't know how. Because the only life they've ever lived is this life. The only thing I can say to you and to anybody who's listening is you have to make the change. You have to want that change. You have to be able to go way beyond what is inside you and how you feel and think about the consequences that could happen. Chrissy never expected David to kill her, nor did she expect him to show up at the VMA that day when she was leaving her appointment. And he did. But before he did that, he stopped at Cumberland Farms. He bought a carton of cigarettes, a brownie mix, and a couple of other things. He walked into the VMA with the screwdriver in his hands with the intentions to kill her. And this is something Chrissy thought that would never, ever, ever happen to her. I thank God to this day that her children were not there. I'm the one that received the call from David's own sister in Virginia telling me that David had killed Chrissy, and my first initial reaction was, this is not a joke. I dropped the F-bomb at that time, because that's not something you joke about. And then I had asked her, did you call 911? And she said, no. I said, let me get off the phone. Now, mind you, in the process of this phone call, my 15-year-old daughter was with me. This is her aunt. This was her world. This was her go-to person, okay? I called 911. By the time I got to my house, our apartment building, cops were there. Chrissy's car was not there. Her door was locked. I had no idea where she was, what really happened. And in the process of all the cops being there, I knew a few of them, and I heard over the speaker that they were going to the VMA. And Chrissy had an appointment that day. And a friend of mine, Chris Taylor, I will never forget his face. He flat out said to me, Lorinda, I can't say nothing to you. But his face told me everything. Everything. I dropped to my knees. I lost my mind. My daughter lost her mind. We had to go to the school and see Dustin and the 3 triplets and try to explain to them what was going on. It was just really, really, really a nightmare. This is something that I would love for you people to understand. No matter how nice or how much you think you love somebody, they always have that potential to hurt you in a way that you would never imagine. Okay? Chrissy loved David. And I believe that right up to the day that he killed her, that she loved him. And the sad part is David didn't love her enough. Did not love her enough. To him, that was his little robot. You do as I say. If I tell you to jump, you jump. And Chrissy jumped. And I've been in those relationships. I know what domestic violence looks like because I'm a survivor of many, 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 many bad choices that I made. Many. And I got myself out of them. And what got me out of those choices that I made was courage and strength to leave and not turn around and say, what if I go back? Because that what if could be your last what if. So my story to you is my sister-in-law's life was taken, but her children's lives were saved. Chrissy died for her kids because she knew that David was eventually going to hurt them too, just like he hurt her. His daughter is now living in Michigan, and she's starting a whole new life, and she's trying to rebuild herself from the abuse that she endured. My daughter is trying to rebuild her life without the aunt that has always been there for her. I need you guys to seriously understand. This is not a joke. Domestic violence is nothing to play with. If for some reason you think that your man is hitting you because he loves you, you're crazy, because that's not the case. He's hitting you because you're allowing him to hit you. Take your power, take your courage, take your strength, and get the hell out of that relationship because it's only going to get worse, and you don't want to land in the same spot Chrissy's at right now.